It's Friday, which means it's time for a new installment of our series where we take an in-depth look at one of history's most amazing archaeological discoveries. In the heart of medieval Europe, festivals were more than just entertainment. They were a rare escape from the grinding hardships of life. For a few days each year, villagers and nobles from across the kingdom would set aside their worries and come together in the capital's grand square to celebrate. It was a chance to forget about the long, cold winters, the ever-present threat of famine, and the looming dangers of war. Instead, they could enjoy the warm glow of communal bonfires, feast on roasted meats and sweet pastries, and watch traveling performers entertain the crowds with music, juggling, and acrobatics. But one particular celebration, meant to unite the kingdom in joy, ended in chaos and bloodshed so horrific that its name was erased from official records. The festival began as a yearly tradition to honor the king's victory in a historic battle against invading Norse. Every year on the first full moon of the summer, villagers and nobles from across the realm would gather in the capital to commemorate the king's valor and the defeat of the pagan invaders. At the time, Northern Europe was a hotbed of religious fervor. As Christianity slowly replaced traditional beliefs, the clash between old and new was fierce, and the annual festival was a chance to reaffirm the kingdom's commitment to the church and its divinely appointed ruler. The celebrations lasted for 3 days, beginning on June and culminating in a grand procession on the 24th. People from all over the kingdom made the pilgrimage to the capital, eager to show their loyalty to the crown and soak up the festive atmosphere. During the daytime, the streets were decorated with banners bearing the royal coat of arms, while food stalls overflowed with roasted meats, sweet pastries, and jugs of ale. Traveling performers kept crowds entertained with music, juggling, and acrobatics. Knights paraded through the streets on horseback, their armor gleaming in the summer sun. The highlight of the procession was a massive cross, carried aloft on the shoulders of 8 strong oxen. Each year, the king would ride at its head, dressed in flowing robes and wearing a jeweled crown. As day turned to night, the festivities grew louder and wilder. Taverns and inns were packed to capacity, and open-air dance halls throbbed with the sound of fiddles and drums. Noble lords caroused with commoners, temporarily forgetting their differences in the general merriment. During the second evening, archery contests and wrestling matches delighted spectators, while groups of men and women sang Bodhi songs and told raucous jokes. Some revelers dressed as hairy wild men and women danced through the crowd, brandishing clubs and making menacing gestures. Even the local clergy joined in the fun, parading through the streets in costumes depicting biblical characters. All in all, it was a time for feasting, drinking, and merrymaking. But beneath the surface, the seeds of discord were being sown. Old rivalries between different regions, personal grudges, and political factions simmered just below the surface. And as the free-flowing ale and wine loosened inhibitions, tempers flared, and violence erupted. It began with a single heated argument between 2 drunken knights from rival regions. One accused the other of stealing his wife away during a tournament in the spring, while the other claimed the first had cheated in the competition. Words were exchanged, insults were hurled, and soon enough, swords were drawn. The crowd gathered to watch, eager to see a good fight. The 2 dueled in the middle of the street, their blades flashing in the torchlight as they lunged and parried. The first knight stumbled, allowing his opponent to land a vicious blow that sent him crashing to the ground, dead. The onlookers gasped and the duel came to a halt. But the silence was shattered by a roar as the dead man's brother charged forward, sword raised high. He cut down the victor and sent him joining his sibling in death. Witnesses say the crowd went wild, some trying to stop the escalating violence, while others took sides and joined the fray. With each fallen knight, more men jumped into the fray, drawn by the promise of glory or simply the thrill of the fight. In a matter of minutes, what began as a duel turned into a full-blown brawl. The entire square descended into chaos, with combatants wielding everything from swords and maces to kitchen knives and axes. Tables were overturned, barrels smashed, and the smell of blood mingled with the stench of stale waste and urine. The ongoing battle drew the attention of the king and his advisors, who watched in horror as noblemen fought tooth and nail in the streets below. But while some lords urged restraint, others saw an opportunity to settle old scores and fan the flames of war. Merchants abandoned their stalls, leaving food and valuables for looters. Fire torches were knocked into wooden structures, igniting flames that quickly consumed nearby tents. Musicians fled mid-performance as screams replaced music. The city guard, already intoxicated, tried to intervene but were beaten back by the sheer number of combatants. Some guards joined the fray, while others fled to safety, abandoning their posts and leaving the city vulnerable. Within minutes, the festival ground became a scene of carnage, littered with overturned tables, smashed barrels, and the bodies of the dead and dying. As the night wore on, the fighting gradually subsided, leaving behind a scene of utter devastation. The square was in ruins, the stench of death hung heavy in the air, and thousands lay injured, many of them cursed with mortal wounds. As the first rays of dawn illuminated the carnage, the king summoned the city watch to restore order. Those who hadn't participated in the violence were arrested, charged with failing to uphold the peace. Some were thrown into dungeons, while others were forced to watch as their comrades were executed for their crimes. The king, horrified at the carnage, ordered an immediate halt to all future celebrations of the festival. Any mention of the disaster was scrubbed from public records, and those who participated were either imprisoned or sent into exile. Survivors struggled to come to terms with the events, unsure how so much joy could turn so quickly to horror. Rumors spread like wildfire, with many blaming rival nobles for inciting the violence to settle old scores. Accusations flew back and forth, but concrete evidence was hard to come by. Most accounts agree that the king's advisors pressured him to minimize the damage and move on. Any talk of punishment or retribution was hushed up to protect the kingdom's reputation. As far as the official chronicles were concerned, no such massacre had ever occurred. The perpetrators were granted noble titles and positions of power, ensuring they would never face justice. But the truth of the matter did not stay buried for long. Over the years, various writers and chroniclers attempted to uncover the truth of the disaster, piecing together accounts from survivors and witnesses. While official records remained frustratingly vague, these unofficial sources painted a grim picture of the events. Many of these writings were lost or destroyed, but a few managed to survive, offering tantalizing glimpses into the true horror of the Blood Moon Festival. Scattered letters written by merchants and nobles paint a vivid picture of the disaster. One merchant wrote of how he abandoned his stall and fled for the hills, witnessing the growing violence from afar. Another described how his companions were murdered before his eyes, leaving him the sole survivor of their group. These first-hand accounts offer a glimpse into the terror that gripped the city that night. But perhaps the most haunting accounts come from those who witnessed the bloodshed firsthand. A young page serving a noble lord described how he watched in horror as fellow revelers turned on one another, their faces contorted with rage and their eyes blazing with a thirst for violence. Another witness recounted how the king's advisors tried in vain to restore order, their pleas for calm drowned out by the din of battle. And yet another described the aftermath, the streets littered with corpses, the stench of death heavy in the air, and the survivors struggling to come to terms with the horror they had witnessed. These fragmented accounts offer a tragic reminder of the human cost of violence and the importance of preserving history in all its forms. The true death toll of the Blood Moon Festival remains unknown, lost to history or deliberately obscured by those in power. Despite the passage of time, the memory of the Blood Moon Festival continues to haunt the city and the kingdom as a whole. The scars of that night run deep, serving as a constant reminder of the fragility of peace and the destructive power of unchecked violence. And while the official narrative seeks to erase the event from memory, the unofficial accounts keep its memory alive. They ensure that the victims are not forgotten, and that the lessons of the past are not ignored. Today, historians piece together the tragedy from these fragments, desperately trying to uncover the truth of the Blood Moon Festival. Scattered letters, diaries, and forbidden songs whispered by locals all offer clues to this horrifying event. Yet despite their efforts, many questions remain unanswered. What exactly triggered the violence? How did the king allow such a travesty to occur? And why did his advisors work so hard to cover it up? Perhaps the truth is too horrible to bear, a reflection of humanity's capacity for cruelty and destruction. By piecing together these fragmented accounts, we gain a deeper understanding of the event and its lasting impact on medieval society. We learn about the social norms and values of the time, the political tensions that simmered beneath the surface, and the religious fervor that drove people to acts of unspeakable violence. We also discover the human cost of war and the importance of preserving history in all its forms. For the Blood Moon Festival is not just a tale of medieval mayhem, it's a cautionary reminder of the dangers of unchecked violence and the importance of seeking peace in a world that often seems determined to embrace war.